So sorry that I'm a little late today. We're going to begin with requests for bill introductions. Do we have any bill introductions today, committee? Anybody on the floor? Okay. We're going to review the committee rules and conferee guidelines. Committee, I know you've just received these, so I'll give you time to look at those, and then we'll vote on them at our next committee. And we have a presentation for the community support waiver for IDD. As I mentioned last time, some of you know that I chair the IDD committee in the interim, and we heard great news from Missouri about what they had done with their community support waiver. I'd reached out to Kirk Matthews, who is the assistant director of Medicaid on the Missouri side. He's in St. Louis today and was unable to be with us, but look forward to a presentation from him later. So, Michelle, if you would come to the microphone. Thank you for being with us. Michelle Hayden from KDADS.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the KDAD's work in developing a new home and community-based services HCBS waiver for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, commonly referred to as the community support waiver. Many members of this committee also served on the 2022-2023 special committees on IDD waiver modernization, and I want to thank you for diving deeper into this issue and providing guidance. Chair Gossage, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Thompson, and Senator Petty. Please note that I will not be reading my testimony verbatim, and there will be more information in my written remarks. I will try to spell out acronyms as I go, because there are a lot of them, but please stop me if you need for me to expand. Before we get into the KDAD's ongoing work in the areas integral to the development of the waiver and the timeline for implementation, let's take a quick look at the issues that spurred the development of the interim committees and desire for Kansas to develop our own community support waiver to serve individuals with IDD. Of the 7 HCBS waivers that KDADS administers, the IDD waiver is the largest and began serving individuals in 1991. KDADS is currently serving more than 8,800 individuals on the comprehensive IDD waiver with an average cost of $53,244 per person per year. There are currently 5,187 individuals on the waiting list for services. Note, KU Center on Developmental Disabilities is in their second year of studying the individuals on the waiting list so that they will be gathering more data about their current and anticipated needs to inform our work in expanding the provider network. The 2022 Special Committee had a number of recommendations, moving away from the BASIS tool and adopting another tool such as the MFEI or MIFI, which will be discussed more later. KDADS was directed to provide a fiscal impact statement for the potential community support waiver with the services discussed by the special committee. The special committee also recommended a $20,000 cap per participant per year. In February 2023, KDADS provided a fiscal impact statement to the House Appropriations Committee. The estimates provided were based on a range of participants for the CSW from approximately 3,600 to 7,461 and can be honed in as KDADS begins receiving results on the ongoing IDD waitlist study being conducted under the contract with KU-CDD. The waiver would be funded with 60% federal funds and 40% SGF. Projections depend on how much funding would be dedicated to a potential new community support waiver by the legislature. Total cost estimates run from approximately $72 million all funds, including $29 million SGF, to $149 million all funds, including $40 million SGF, when fully implemented. KDAD suggests an approach in which the agency would work with the Community Developmental Disability Organizations, or CDDOs, and other stakeholders to roll out the waiver in a phased approach. This would be done to ensure system capacity is not overloaded, ensure appropriate service provision, ensure the waiver is implemented correctly. Like other areas in health and human services, direct care staff worker shortages have been the challenge for the IDD waiver. The governor and the legislature have supported funding to increase direct care rates over the last few years. But the success of this new waiver is contingent on adequate network capacity. So for an example of the rollout, in year one, if we were to serve 500 participants with a $20,000 cost cap, this equates to approximately 10 million all funds, including 4 million SGF. Year two, if we were going to serve an additional 1,000 participants, it would be with a $20,000 cost cap. That equates to an additional approximately 20 million all funds, 8 million SGF. After hearing the estimates, the House Social Services Budget Committee added a budget proviso in 2023, House Bill 2184, directing KDADs to apply to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, for a community support waiver. Today, I'm here to give you an update on work KDADS has been doing in line with the proviso to lay the groundwork for successful application and implementation of a community support waiver in Kansas. First, though, why did we choose the community support waiver? The 2022 Special Committee heard from nearly a dozen states, including many who had some sort of community support waiver, which is generally designed to serve individuals with lower level of need than the current comprehensive waiver. Many states put a per person per month cap on CSW. The recommendation from the 2022 Special Committee was $20,000. Different array of services on the CSW than on a comprehensive waiver. So the CSW doesn't provide services such as overnight attendant care, residential, or day services. The emphasis on services such as supported employment, as well as respite, training, and personal care options. Suggested service array from the 2022 Special Committee were transportation to and from work, supported employment, individual directed goods and services, giving people budget authority to the individual so they can purchase goods and services as they will assist the person in meeting their goals, personal care, individualized one-to-one services provided during times when the participant is typically not sleeping, respite, giving families some relief when they're caring for their loved ones. Different therapies can be talk therapy, cognitive or behavioral, assistive technology, technological devices and programs to make the person more independent, independent living, persons who need minimal staff support to live on their own in a home or apartment, family caregiver support and training, parent support staff training and diagnoses, financial management services, support brokers, assistance with personal budgets and expenditures, benefits counseling, navigator to help person and their family understand Medicaid in Kansas. KDADS also anticipates there would be an increase in the number of people who self-direct their care. This will provide beneficiaries with more autonomy with choosing respite and personal care staff. KDADS also anticipates that participants who currently are on the IDD waiver who do not utilize day and residential supports may choose to transfer to the community support waiver, as they would be allowed to have individual budget authority. Individual budget authority will allow the participant to purchase goods and services in the waiver and tailor them to their distinct needs and preferences. That shift will free up slots on the current comprehensive IDD waiver for participants who will benefit and have a need for the more expensive day and residential services. Now that we've talked a little bit about the who, what, where, and why, let's get into the how and when. So the work underway with KDADS and partners. Integral to development of the new HCBS waiver, KDADS has many large projects underway around the implementation of the final settings rule, CDDO TCM conflict of interest, the MFEI tier rates, and changes to the comprehensive IDD waiver, such as unbundling of certain services and building the provider network. Final settings rule refers to a CMS directive protecting the rights and choices and guarding against institutionalization or isolation of those served in the HCBS system. Final rule aims to ensure individuals receiving long-term services and supports through HCBS programs have full access to benefits of community living and to the opportunity to receive services in the most integrated and inclusive setting appropriate. The work KDADs and providers are doing will enhance our ability to deliver services on the community support waiver in the most integrated and inclusive setting. CMS notified Kansas that within our current IDD waiver system, in which the CDDOs determine eligibility, that the eligibility should not be providing the same entity determining eligibility should not be providing services. The same is true for targeted case management. If you're providing TCM, you shouldn't be connected to a provider, as that might impact how choice is given to the participants. KDADS is working to resolve this conflict of interest by working with stakeholders, CDDOs, and contracting with the National Association of State Developmental Disability Directors. Moving away from the basis assessment as recommended by the 2022 Special Committee into a strengths-based assessment, KDADS has already been working towards moving to the MFEI as an assessment tool. This will require a lot of work, as the basis assessment is currently tied to tier levels of funding for the comprehensive waiver, so we must work out the conversion from a tiered system with a new assessment tool for both current and comprehensive waiver, as well as the new community support waiver. It will be important to use the same assessment tool for both waivers to allow for flow between the waivers. Other changes to current comprehensive IDD waiver for the CMS renewal this summer. We'll be working on unbundling some of our services, expanding the provider network. Important to note that both the renewal of the existing waiver and the work towards a CSW development are occurring concurrently, so as not to delay implementation of the community support waiver. Upon the recommendation of Senator Gossage, KDADS met with the Missouri State Waiver Team, which has been immensely helpful. Missouri has 3 HCBS waivers for individuals with IDD, a comprehensive waiver, a community support waiver that does not offer residential services and is capped at $40,000 per year, Pathways for Hope waiver, which is capped at $12,000 and it requires a 50% match of the state's obligation from the counties who want to participate. It is not as simple as taking the Missouri Community Support Waiver off the shelf and plugging it into the Kansas system. Missouri does not have CDDOs or managed care organizations authorizing HCBS services, which are both key components to the HCBS IDD system. Missouri's community support waiver now has a cap of $40,000, whereas the legislature has directed KDADS to cap ours at $20,000. This directly impacts utilization estimates, cost neutrality modeling, and how we design the overall service menu to achieve the desired results. Between Missouri and Kansas, there are also rate discrepancies, differing state regulations, network capacity, etc. Most importantly, and as required by CMS as part of the waiver development, is that Kansas has very engaged stakeholders, and we want to listen to their recommendations and feedback as we develop the community support waiver. In August 2023, KDADS received approval from CMS to use FMAP funds to hire staff and contractor for the community support waiver. The governor's FY25 budget continues the staffing with and adds additional staffing. Currently, KDADS is in the process of hiring community support waiver staff. We do have one on board and an external consultant for additional assistance in development of the application of the community support waiver. KDADS has developed a task order that is now going through the procurement process, and we expect to have a contractor in place by April. Using a task order does shave time off compared to the procurement process of a RFP, or request for proposal. Once the procurement process is complete and our contractor is in place, they will form and convene stakeholder groups to provide feedback to the state regarding services. Kansas stakeholders will drive the development of the community support waiver. Later this summer, the contractor will draft the application for Kansas's community support waiver and work to expand the provider network. High staff turnover rates and consistent vacancies in the direct care workforce is one of the main challenges, both for the current comprehensive IDD waiver as it will be for the community support waiver. The challenge is not unique to Kansas and is being seen across the nation. KDADS has a number of initiatives underway to address the HCBS workforce. We have the waiting list study, which I've already mentioned. We have a direct service workforce training program we are working on and a workforce training and career ladder study. Throughout the entire timeline, KDADS, assisted by the contractor and stakeholders, will be working to build provider network capacity alongside our current providers and welcome new providers interested in providing CSW services. This fall, there will be a public comment period as required by CMS. Kansas has many engaged stakeholders, and we want to be sure to include their input in developing of the new waiver for Kansans with IDD. The waiver application should be submitted to CMS, and then we anticipate a 3 to 6 month review approval process from CMS. The process for the waiver implementation requires approval from CMS, and their requirements and timelines impact how rapidly new waiver can be implemented. The 3 to 6 month window for CMS review and approval is based on recent post-pandemic experience that Kansas has had with CMS on various amendments and renewals. So no later than the final quarter of 2025, we hope to begin serving our initial CSW participants. The development of the CSW as quickly as possible is a major priority for KDADS and the administration, and we are eager to continue that progress. Thank you for allowing us time to provide this update, and I'm now available for questions.
Michelle, thank you so much for that thorough report. And as you can imagine, I was hoping it would be cut and paste from Missouri, but it sounds like it's not going to be that simple. And I really appreciate you guys following through and meeting with them. And I've heard good report back from them that they're doing everything they can to help. Before I start with my questions, committee, do you have questions for Michelle? Yes. Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Michelle, and thank you for the report. It was very thorough and helpful for me to catch up on the latest update. So I've been trying to write a few questions as I'm reading your testimony and as you're speaking. First question I was came to mind was, you mentioned here that the CDDO and target case management is apparently a conflict of, or considered a conflict of interest by CMS. Has CMS communicated that to us?
Yes, they have. It's also in a CFR that we need to, those providing direct service provision should not be associated with those that have determining eligibility or that the person that's helping you to select service provision. That's been the way it has been in Kansas for many years. Not every CDDO is connected to a service provider, but many are.
And could you provide that documentation from CMS?
Yes, I can.
And then thank you. Another question is just kind of the timeline here. I mean, it seems very long. So I guess I would just ask hypothetically, if Medicaid expansion was to pass, how long would it take Laura Kelly to apply for a waiver through CMS? I don't think it would take 4 years. So
I don't know, and that's a different area. My expertise is in waivers, but not for Medicaid expansion.
It just seems that, having to hire a consultant when so many stakeholders and community partners are ready and, willing to get this rolling, it just seems, the timeline just seems a little stretched. I just wish we could see what we can do to get that moving.
My Representative Carpenter's already contacted me, and he really wants us to move this along. When we get a vendor in place, we're going to really work hard with them to see if we can shorten that timeline. Like Senator Gossage, I wish we could cut and paste and have the provider network ready to go. It's not going to happen that way, unfortunately. But we will work to do everything we can to shorten that timeline.
And this is just last question, Madam Chair. So you don't believe we can truly apply for this waiver without having to hire a consultant, which is really what's delaying this process? You don't think we can go straight to just using our...
We think that the best route for us to go is to have the consultant in place. We've talked to some potential vendors, and they believe they can probably pull that out pretty quickly. We don't have the staff currently available to write the waiver. We are funded based on what waivers we do have at this time. And with all the additional projects that we have right now, we're pretty booked up, but we're going to dedicate a lot of time to the community support waiver.
Senator Holscher.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. To kind of piggyback with one of Senator Blasey's questions, I know that in Missouri, when they expanded Medicaid, the IDD list went down, do you have any reason to think that that wouldn't happen also in Kansas if we expanded?
It could potentially happen, people that are on our waiting list for like the PD waiver and the IDD waiver, some people may be satisfied that don't currently qualify for Medicaid, but under Medicaid expansion could qualify, may be able to get the state plan services that they need through Medicaid expansion.
And then if I may, can you tell me of the 8,800 on the waiting list? Do you know geographically where they're located? Is there a concentration in certain areas?
It's actually 5,000 are on the waiting list. We're serving 8,800, but I don't have a geographic mapping for that. Since most people live in the eastern part of the state, I'm guessing most of them are there, but I could see if I can get that information for you.
No, I would be curious to
Yep.
see where the concentration.
Yep.
And committee, other questions? If I could just piggyback on what was said about the Medicaid expansion, the majority of these folks, of course, already are disabled, and the disabled are receiving Medicaid services currently.
About 70% on the waiting list are already on Medicaid for the IDD waiver.
So if I could go back then of the questions that I had, of course, I share Senator Blaze's concern of how long this is going to take. The stakeholders that have reached out to, I can only speak for myself, but I've heard from our other committee members, they want it yesterday. How can I get my child off this waiting list? They've been on the waiting list for 8 years. What's taking so long? And if we can say, well, this is coming, we're working on it, et cetera. So how long do you think, let's say that you hire this consultant and it's an RFP situation, so you've got to get the quotes in, and then you hire somebody, then they meet with stakeholders, and then they give you feedback. What do you expect to get back? When you met with these other states, what sort of feedback did they get back?
They said it took, from start to finish about 18 months to 2 years to get a waiver in place. That tends to be the typical timeline. I think we aren't going to go through the RFP process, but do a task order, which just shave some time off of our procurement process to get a vendor in, because the vendors are already approved to use. So, I'm basing my estimates on past experience and the what I'm getting from other states.
And another question that I had was, you said that the difference between Missouri and us is there was some rate discrepancies, but you also mentioned state regs. I know you don't have those with you today, but could you give me the list of state regulations? Maybe if there are some state regulations that we could look at and see if that would give you, maybe speed this thing up. Do you think that's possible?
Let me see what I can do. And I'll
Okay.
be back with you, Senator.
Thank you. And committee, do we have any other questions? Yes, Senator Holscher.
Thank you. Could you tell me what the average wages are for someone working in direct care services?
I think the last I saw was between $10 to up to $15 an hour now. Some pay more. That includes some of the money that we were able to get through the FMAP funding. We gave bonuses and retention bonuses and hiring bonuses, but that's not included in the wages. But I will get you an exact number.
Yeah, and I'd be curious too where we are as far as, and maybe you mentioned it in there and I just didn't see it or hear it, where we are as far as, I'm guessing under on the number of employees that are needed. As far as, I'm guessing there's a target as far as how many are needed and where we actually are.
I can see what we can do to get that information. Absolutely.
Other questions, committee? Seeing none, Michelle, thank you so much for being here, and then please keep us apprised of how things are progressing, and if you get back to me on those regulations, we would appreciate it.
I'll be very glad to do so.
Thank you. Committee, since we have a little time here, I would like to take then just a moment for us to go back to the rules. Do we have any questions or on the guidelines for appearing before the committee or the rules? These are the same as last year, I should say. No additions. If not, no questions, then I'll entertain a motion to approve. Thank you, Senator Thompson. Have a second? Have a second from Senator Erickson. All in favor, aye? Aye. Okay, we will use these rules. Committee, this is all the business that we had for today, and we are adjourned.